Thanks. And thanks, Sarah, for saying do so I don't have to. But yeah, so about 3 months ago and about several Homer Simpson impressions ago, I proposed this talk about DNS over HTTPS or DOH, D-O-H, having heard about a lot of controversy it was causing in the standards-making community among ISPs and researchers, governments, and privacy-conscious users. Since then, the protocol has just about reached prime time. Its rollout to users of Chrome and Firefox browsers is imminent. I think for US-based Firefox browsers, it's already happened, like in the past week or two. But DOH, for the uninitiated, is a new protocol developed within the IETF as RFC 8484, with the aim of preventing, quote, on-path interference in DNS operations, meaning it intends to protect end users from eavesdropping, state censorship, and from the malicious manipulation of traffic via the DNS. So effectively, a privacy upgrade to the DNS, which sounds like it might be a good thing, right? However, because it moves control over your choice of DNS server into the browser, its arrival has upset a lot of parties that rely on either monitoring or manipulating the DNS or are concerned about the concentration of power that could possibly occur as a result of default browser behavior. So there's people for and against this new protocol on all sides, and in this talk I'll try to unpack some of the arguments on the many sides of this debate, many sides, and try to figure out what we can do as users if we're concerned about the impact of DOH. But before we go too much further, let's just do a quick recap of DNS and talk about a little bit about how DOH works. So if we go right back to the basics, DNS is what we use when we want to convert a host's domain name to an IP address so we can reach that domain over the internet. So with traditional DNS, we're usually automatically told the address of our DNS server when we connect to a network, and that information is usually stored in our operating system and or on our router. Some people choose to set their own, but they're in the minority. DNS requests and responses are sent and received in clear, unencrypted text over a DNS-specific port number, 53. And if we were to try to resolve a domain name, it would work kind of something like this diagram here. So say we want to visit the web page of radicalnetworks.org. The first thing we need to know is the IP address of the web server, so we know how to route to it over the internet. So us as the client over here on the left, or what DNS types call the stub resolver, would ask our assigned DNS server or our recursive resolver to find that IP address. So assuming it's the first time in a while anyone's looked up this address, so there's nothing being saved in a cache or anything, the recursive resolver will forward the request straight to the root server. That's the first thing it will ever do. The root server only keeps track of the locations or authoritative servers for top-level domains like .org, .com, .net. So it will respond saying, I know the authoritative server for .org, it's number 2, go to number 2. The recursive resolver will then send the request to the authoritative for the .org top-level domain, which keeps track of all the authoritative servers under .org, and will point the recursive server towards the server that has authority over radicalnetworks.org. Number 3. So it will just say, go and ask number 3. Typically that would be an IP address, but I didn't have enough room on my diagram. So anyway, the recursive now asks number 3, which is the full set of DNS records for radicalnetworks.org, and it responds with the correct IP address. The recursive finally then forwards that result back to us on our little laptop here on the left. So then we finally know how to get to the web server for radicalnetworks.org. So now that we've got DNS down, what about HTTPS? So HTTPS is the secure way of accessing the web, which was also previously done in unencrypted plain text on HTTP. It's got its own port number, 443, and it uses transport layer security to encrypt the communication channel between a web client, so a browser, and a web server. So DOH then is DNS messages placed inside an HTTP-like wrapper and sent over a TLS encrypted connection. Note that there is also DNS over TLS. That's a separate protocol. It runs on its own separate port number. And why one and not the other is kind of a complicated argument, but suffice to say that every firewall in the world is already configured to allow port 443. And the HTTP model of interaction is already well known and widely understood. And it has some nifty features like push, which help web browsers preemptively resolve addresses. So the ease of adoption is one of the main arguments for DOH over DOT. So yeah, how is DOH different to DNS as we know it? So the thing is, it's not making a fundamental change to the way DNS operates. It's really just sending the communications channel between clients like a laptop or a phone and a recursive resolver over an encrypted channel. The whole global centralized hierarchy of DNS lookups that we just reviewed before stays exactly the same. So why DOH? And basically because everything you do on the net begins with a DNS request. So this in effect means that anyone with access to your DNS traffic can build a complete profile of your online activity. Since 2017, US ISPs have had the right to sell this data in anonymized form. I'm not sure about other countries, but it does seem like a potential goldmine for the less scrupulous ISPs out there. So this data can be easily gathered by a malicious actor eavesdropping on a wire, or even easier on Wi-Fi, between the client and recursive resolver as well. And since it's in plain text, the DNS data is easy to manipulate or tamper with, or easy to masquerade as a legitimate source, which opens the door for monkey in the middle style attacks. And I love that that type of attack has a new name. It's about time. So if we go back to our DNS diagram just for a sec, and I can find my slide. Hey. Yeah, so we can see that an eavesdropper, if an eavesdropper was to intercept a response from the recursive resolver in the middle, that's headed back to our client, and it changes the IP address to something else, it can easily redirect the client to a malicious website instead of radicalnetworks.org. So governments and law enforcement also traditionally have gained access to users' DNS data at the recursive resolver as well. And yeah, again, like I said, barrier to adoption pretty low with DOH. So what does that actually achieve? What does it do? So by encrypting that communication channel between the stub and the recursive, DOH can hide the contents of a DNS lookup over that particular specific first path. The main thing that this does is guard against tampering with DNS results close to the end user, which is where they happen, well, most often. Also hiding DNS queries among normal HTTPS traffic also provides a kind of level of obfuscation, which makes it harder to identify which is the DOH traffic and which is the normal HTTPS web traffic. Yeah, and it also has some nifty extra functionality like being able to preemptively resolve domain names before you go to them. So apparently that will speed up browsing. Time will tell. What doesn't it do? So there's a bunch of things that DOH isn't designed to help with, and communications between recursives and the authoritative servers is one of them. These communications are still sent in plain text. However, the DNSSEC protocol is designed to validate these kind of messages using digital signatures, though adoption is currently fairly low. DOH also doesn't make the operator of your DNS resolver any more trustworthy. Whether it's your ISP or a public open resolver like Google or Cloudflare or OpenDNS, these organizations can still see your queries, and we as users need to make a call as to whom we actually trust with our personal data. DOH also doesn't verify or validate the results you receive. So if your resolver has been attacked or hijacked, you'll still get the hijacked responses over DOH. Again, it's DNSSEC that's designed to help in that regard. That's probably a whole other talk though. So if it does all this good stuff, what's everyone so worried about, right? And the concerns come from a lot of different angles. Some come out of concern for user privacy and concentration of personal information, which is a big one. Others because existing ways of doing business and operating the internet, aka making money, have been disrupted. And since DOH means that DNS sessions can be coupled with HTTPS, the place to configure a DNS server now becomes the browser and not the operating system or the user's router. This means that browser makers now have even more visibility of what we're doing online, and ISPs have less. So given that one browser in particular, Chrome, has such a huge segment of the browser market, it's a bit over 60%, people are concerned about how Chrome may implement DOH and whether it will mean a huge shift in internet users using Google's DNS services, giving them access to significantly more user data. At this time, Google says they won't move users to DOH by default, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Firefox, however, will. So now let's break down some of the concerns into some broad groups. So users. Users and user advocates are concerned about the potential for the increase in the centralization and consolidation of user data in an already quite centralized internet ecosystem. And while operators like Cloudflare say the data collected will be anonymized, there's still a lack of transparency about how the data will be used and ultimately why we should trust DOH operators. Mozilla has made a list of requirements that DOH providers must satisfy to become a partner in the Trusted Recursive Resolver program, which includes things like they must not sell the data, they must remove personally identifying information, transparency reporting requirements, and publicly documenting all domains that are blocked or filtered. It remains to be seen how heavily or lightly DOH operators will censor or filter their results, and whether they consider they have a responsibility to intervene in extreme cases of things like speech, hate speech or abuse. The other concern for the everyday user is that DOH, and therefore the sending of their personal browsing data to a third party, will be introduced in Firefox at least by default without an explicit user opt-in or choice of resolver. ISPs. So some ISPs gather data about their users through DNS. Others redirect unresolvable domain names to custom portals or ads. I know Time Warner Cable used to do this. I don't know if they do anymore. Probably. Network operators in general want to control their own network, and some resent browser manufacturers for interfering and taking this control away from them. A group of UK ISPs nominated Mozilla for the award of 2019 Internet Villain, which I didn't know was an award, maybe next year, for its plan to support DOH. It seems you don't have to do much. But yeah, they said that would prevent them from filtering bad traffic, child porn, malware, and so on. Some ISPs, yeah, again, may also be making money through either selling that DNS data or redirecting unresolvable domains to ads. So, you know, they have something to lose in this game. Governments and law enforcement agencies. Many governments around the world use the DNS as an easy way of implementing censorship of things like child porn, hate speech, piracy, and claim that losing the ability to censor via the DNS will impact these efforts. For example, the UK was relying on the DNS to implement a porn filter, which incidentally would necessitate them keeping a list of every user who ever looked up porn in the UK, which couldn't possibly go wrong. US Congress also chimed in on this debate, and they're concerned about the possibility of anti-competitive conduct occurring when Google implements DOH in Chrome. The details of how they'll do that, though, are sketchy at the moment, so at the moment there is just concern from government. Some researchers, there's been a small outcry from some researchers who rely on analysing and measuring internet activity via plain text DNS traffic, who say that their job will now be made much more difficult. But some other researchers have already shown that the domain being looked up and the subsequent web page being retrieved can be predicted with a high level of accuracy based on HTTPS fingerprinting, that is, by observing traffic patterns and metadata, such as the destination address of an IP packet, which is always still out there in plain text. So monitoring whether for altruistic or malicious purposes is still possible. It's just slightly less easy to do. So should we be concerned? Should we be concerned about the consolidation of power? Allow me to emphatically answer yes and always. Should we trust organizations whose primary motivation is to make money from our private data, even though they claim to be acting in the best interests of the internet? Well, the thing that sucks about the internet is that the whole thing runs on trust, and you've got to trust someone if you want to use it. It seems at this point in the game, the best stance we can take as users is to be informed. Another cause for concern is whether DOH operators share your views on censorship. Speaking personally, I found Cloudflare's performance in the wake of the Christchurch shootings to be pretty uninspiring. If you don't know about that, there was a wide call for them to take down 8chan, and they didn't want to lose the money until the outcry was too large and they caved in. Anyway, is it too late? Well, the protocol is already designed and it's able to be turned on in some browsers, though you can always join the ongoing work of maintaining the protocol or having your say about the future changes by joining discussions at the IETF. As intimidating as it seems, I'm reassured by many IETF regulars that they are extremely welcoming to newcomers, technical and non-technical alike. The impression I get is that an IETF meeting or mailing list will probably most likely bore you to death before it will make you feel unwelcome. So feel free to sign up for that mailing list. But seriously, that's how you know what's coming. Also, there's already DOH malware, so it's already happening, even though it's not exactly widespread yet. So what else can we do? So while the browser implementations are already in place, one thing we can continue to do as users is to advocate for each other and request that browser makers implement sensible defaults with explicit opt-in and user choice. If you're a little more hands-on, you can also start taking advantage of the tools that are already out there that aim to help people use DOH in an informed manner. The curl project has a GitHub, or the curl GitHub has a list of publicly available servers, so that if you wish to configure a custom DOH server in your browser, the choice is yours. In Firefox at the moment, there is a choice of one, and it's Cloudflare. I can't speak for Chrome, but it's good that someone's putting the choice of all resolvers out there. That page also includes a list of other available DOH tools, which is worth a look too. One of those tools is Jack Kingsman's DOH proxy site. I think it's, yeah, dohproxy.com, which shows you how to set up your own DOH proxy, which will allow you to spread your queries across a number of DOH services to provide further obfuscation of your data trail. So if nothing else, your data is ending up at a bunch of different providers and not all in the one place. Or do we just burn it all down and start again? Well, that's the cool thing about being here, is that there are people who are using alternative networks and figuring out different ways that work better for people. And you know, there are alternative networks out there that do naming way better than the internet. DNS was a hack, it was added on at the end, and it shows, but now we have to live with it. And since the web is now pretty ingrained in everyday life, we need to do banking, we need to apply for jobs on the web. So now we just owe it to each other to advocate for each other and continue making tools to help, like these ones. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thanks, Adam. Yes.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question about one of the slides. It seemed like it was saying that, the way it was phrased, it seemed like it was saying that browser makers would have more information about you, but I'm wondering what that information, because they already know, the browser already knows everything you're doing, right? Except for maybe which DNS resolver you're using, which is the one new thing that it now knows. Is that what, is it the important piece that it didn't know before, or are we just saying that it has more exclusive access to information it already had, whereas other entities have less?
Yeah, good point. They do already know pretty much everything. Yeah. In the case of Google, who own their own resolver and own their own browser, we're maybe just giving it to them in an easier way. But yeah, no, you make a good point. They pretty much already know.
Thank you.
Actually, can I just do it down the line like this?
Hey, thanks. Really nice talk. Can you said, oh, there are some projects that do like naming better. Can you just riff a little bit on what some of those are to the uninitiated?
Sure, yeah. So, the thing about DNS is the internet originally didn't have host names. It was all numbers. It was, host names were recorded on paper and everyone trusted each other. So protocols that have been made since then, especially ones that take advantage of things like content addressing, where the name of the thing you're going to describes or is a hash of the actual data it's holding, and it's built into the protocol of how you get to A to B. To me, that seems to be a better system, although obviously it's not the one where we have to work with. IPFS does that, not just off the top of my head, but a bunch of other newer ones also, which I can't name right now.
Okay.
Thank you, that was a great talk. I thought you did a really nice job of kind of giving some of this has been a really controversial subject of what protocol is going to protect the DNS. And as we've shifted to talking about the DNS over HTTP, we've also sort of assumed that conversation is about protecting browser queries, right? But in a way, the DNS is much lower level than browsers. Other daemons on my machine are going to use the DNS. Do you know of is this conversation still really just about browsers, and maybe with DNS over HTTPS we're going to maybe fix it for browsers, but then everything else is still going to use the regular DNS? Do you know how that's going to work?
That's the thing is, yeah, it is more than browsers. So I don't think regular DNS is going to go anywhere anytime soon. There are I know Cloudflare have a service you can install to use their DOH for everything. There are probably others. So if you want to use it at a system level, I think you can. Will most people? Probably not. Will applications other than web browsers? Yeah, not sure yet.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Hi, my question is about authentication of the DNS server to the client. And so I assume that uses HTTPS. Is that like the presumption?
I don't even know if there is an authentication phase.
Okay, so how does it actually prevent like monkey in the middle attacks then? If
Because you're using HTTPS.
oh, okay, so that's
it.
Right, but that's the authentication I'm talking about.
Oh,
The
yeah.
authentication
At the
of the
TLS
of the
level.
server to so that the client knows that the server is legitimate.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, actually.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine, yeah, you need to trust the certificate or something. But I am not 100% on top of that, sorry.
Thanks.
Were there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Adam.